Welcome back to the channel. This is the West Allis or West Allis second day of Tour of America's Dairyland, or TOAD Cat 2-3 race. And you can see I'm cutting in here at about 15 minutes in. The first lap or so I was off the front by myself. I like to get a fast start, but I only had the rear cam. It's not nearly as entertaining. However, you'll see I have a rear cam. So now you can see who's eating my dust, and most likely it's just the moto. There's a good portion of this race where I'm the last, or one of the very last riders in the group. There's a lot of tail gunning going on, but there's also a lot of pain from the crash the day before. So I want to go through the first lap of this course. You can see it's kind of this odd shape. These turns down here are generally high speed. The corners themselves are in pretty good shape. There is a pothole right in the middle of the first one. The second one here, you can see we can come through it pretty quick. Anywhere from 27 to 30 miles an hour with almost no problem. The black tar on the road here creates what people like to call tar snakes. And for the most part, you almost didn't notice it, but if you hit one and you're kind of in the middle of a turn, you can feel it sort of squirm around on you. So what happens is the sun hits it, it gets hot, grabs your tire, or moves just a little bit underneath it under pressure. And so a little nervy, but it wasn't actually that hot. In fact, the weather is perfect. Sometimes you come out here to TOAD and it's raining and cold. This is not one of those years. And so a fantastic day for filming and riding and in general, just everything. So you can see I'm kind of just tail gunning this. And part of the reason is that on a lot of these turns, the group was bunching up a lot. The other reason is that I have zero ability to sprint. I'm still in the injured state here, and this is the sign of experience, frankly. I can kind of read the group up ahead, and I can see that we're going to slow, and that people are going to take bad lines in these corners, and that, hey, look, I'm back on the group. So moving on, we're about halfway through this race, and I'm still very much aware that I'm injured. In fact, you can even, at least I don't have missing skin and things like that. This poor guy. So this back section here, that going north, we had a little bit of a headwind, and it's also kind of deceptively downhill. So what happens a lot of the time was the group would go into it pretty fast, but then guys at the front would lose motivation. And then down here at the bottom, these turns demand respect, and so it would slow down and bunch up. One of the best places on the course to move up. Required almost no energy. Basically just soft pedal ahead of everybody. You can look in the rearview mirror and say hello to the race moto. You're going to see that a lot. But, there's not really anything going on in the race. We are strung out, but for the most part, there's not like a break. There's not guys off the road. There's just nothing. And so sitting back here and just kind of easing it around the turns and not worrying too much about coming out of the corners, being able to take the line that I want, that kind of thing. And you can see I'm starting to read that the guys around me here might actually be dropping the wheel versus just kind of sandbagging. So I do go around a few of them, but I'm still not all that concerned. And you can see up ahead, just as I was saying, about halfway down this straight, it starts to go downhill a little bit. People start realizing they're going into the wind. Everyone's thinking about the corner ahead. And so it just kind of bunches up. People just stop pedaling. Great place to make up a few spots for free, as long as you're willing to take the risk and, basic racecraft. You can see there's still nothing really happening on the front. And I don't really know if the whole race was this way. I spent a lot of it looking at mid-pack. But it was a course that probably didn't lend itself too well to like a small breakaway. If a break was going to go, it needed 4 or 5 guys to really dedicate themselves to it. So here we are again on that north section here, and you can see this is much later in the race, maybe with like 6-7 to go, and I just decide, yeah, you can spend just a little bit of energy, move past some folks, and it's really not that bad. For the most part, people are taking this turn appropriately. And I'm also chatting a little bit with this CMU guy. We're trying to figure out if there's anything dangerous going on up the road. Really, the only shot I have, just like in the race before, of having any sort of good result is probably to either try to be in the front and go with 3 or maybe 4 lap attack, which honestly, in the state I was in, I really probably couldn't have even done that. It's nice to dream. Um, but it's certainly not to be back here because one of the things that being in the washing machine demands is that you can sprint, and that's usually what wears people out. But in my case, it means I wouldn't even be there. So now we're coming up on, I believe this is going to be 6 laps to go. And you can see it's gotten much faster and it's more strung out, a little more selected. You can see that the front of the race is up the road a little bit more than I'd like it to be. And guys behind me are dropping off. And there's now quite a few of them there. I've managed to make some passes, trying to keep my head on a swivel here and just take any advantage I can moving up. But at the same time, like, it's weird when you don't have a sprint because you can't do those high-powered, 900,000 watt burst for 5 seconds and make up a bunch of places and come into something with momentum. And so, like, I don't know if it was a mental block because I couldn't do that, or if I really just wasn't thinking it through, but I had a really hard time moving up. It kind of felt like I was locked in wherever I was. I didn't feel fatigued or overwhelmed, and you can actually see my heart rate's under control. Watts aren't really that high. Not really struggling in any other way, but like, here's a moment. See the slowdown? This would be so great if you had a sprint, to be able to come around. And remember, we're about to go into 5 laps to go. So coming into this, once again, I managed to fish my way up towards the front over the course of the last lap, and I know it's important to be up here. There's nobody up the road, so this front group of riders is going to be, the winner is going to come from them most likely. It's very hard to hold off a pack in the late stages of a race like this. And so under normal circumstances, you see that guy in pink going up there. I don't know how serious he is, but it would have been a great time to make up a bunch more places. So I get stuck a little bit. You can see a couple of guys going up the front. It doesn't look super dangerous, but they're there. And it's getting exciting. So these last 5 laps are pretty entertaining. I wish I could say I was up there in the mix, having some sort of influence, but instead I'm back here just trying my best to replicate a sprint in the saddle. And so those 2 guys up the road, I mean, they're extending their gap. Doesn't look like the front's particularly concerned about catching that. And again, under normal circumstances, this would be a great time to punch it and make up a couple slots. Again, this is sidewind at best, so you really don't pay a huge penalty. And there's this turn that, for some reason, people are just nervous about. And it's not like anyone's making particularly bad choices here. It could be so much faster. So you can see that this time, unlike some of the laps where we bunch up and people stop pedaling, now we're continuing to pedal a little bit longer. Guys are recognizing that this is starting to be some of the last moments in the race to do anything about any of this. So coming through, I believe this is now 3 to go, and field is now pretty strung out. We still have some guys off the front, but it looks like they're going to catch them. But now we're moving fast enough that moving up on this section doesn't really make sense. So I'm kind of trying to bide my time to see if there's possible to come past any of these guys. But frankly, I think racing when you're injured, I mean, pros do it, but that's also their job. There's something about doing it when you really don't have any real reason to, outside of maybe your own ego. It's not really a good idea. And I think this is why. Like, in some sense, this race was one long, aimless group ride because I was missing tools in my kit. Like, you wouldn't show up to build something without a hammer and some nails and maybe a measuring tape. And I'm like missing the hammer. And turns out you need a hammer, especially in career racing. Like, there's this concept in psychology called affordances. There's this guy named J.J. Gibson, very famous, again, amongst the right circles, for recognizing the fact that, like, your thought about things is very connected to the object or item that you might be thinking about. So in the case of like you've heard the adage, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And in part, that's because like a hammer affords pounding on things, whereas a screwdriver doesn't. I mean, you can use a screwdriver as a hammer like tool, but not obvious that that's what you should do with it. So I think there's that concept happening here. Frankly, like I think when you have a sprint, you look for places to use it. So all these guys up out of the saddle every lap on some of these areas, like that's because they can. You definitely don't need to, and I think some of the stronger riders don't because it's an energy conservation thing. You can do it for less watts. You're not going to fatigue those sprint muscles when you need them later. I mean, sometimes you have to, right? But it's generally not a good idea. But also when you can sprint, then you can also look for places where you should. You know, you can be on the lookout for like, hey, this is an opportunity to attack. Hey, this is an opportunity to bridge a gap real quick, or go up the road or whatever it is. So not having that, it really makes you view the race very differently. And it kind of takes the sting out. Like there are plenty of these places where I'm like, oh, I should hop around this, and I'm like, oh, I can't. So a little bit of like feeling like you're being told you can't do stuff. Takes the fun out of it a little bit. So looking forward to getting better. Back here where I'm at, we got one guy up the road, maybe two guys up the road. It doesn't look like they're going to get caught. Someone's going to have to do a Superman pull to do that. And instead, it's just kind of like punching, and we're not really committing to that. Again, we come through that first turn so poorly. Now, one of the things you'll see here is like everyone knows this is a spot to move up, but they're thinking about it in terms of like this is the part of the course to move up on, instead of like this was the place to move up when no one was pedaling. Now it's too late for that. So a bunch of guys just blew like the first half of their sprint to move up here, and I mean, admittedly, if you were back where you shouldn't have been, that's exactly what you would do. But you got the guys in the front here who didn't have to do that. And so the first 5 or 6 riders through that turn right there, I mean, chances are when they go, they're going to have their full sprint available to them. And so you can see me back here, like I'm still able to do something like 700 watts in the saddle and like almost keep up with it. But at the sharp end of it, you know, people who can sprint are just going to get around me. And at this point, like I kind of recognize this is silly. So I think like psychology always plays a role in sport, and being injured affects that, and not just from like a, you know, do you feel good, are you happy kind of way. It actually affects what you can see and think about doing, and it's interesting to think about that and the implications it has. So I probably won't ever really race injured ever again. And that was West Allis.